Hammurabi of Babylon, an Amorite of Mesopotamia, what is now called Baghdad, on the banks of Tigris and Euphrates in 1750, seems to have coded a famous law code as the emperor, perhaps model for others, including the Mosaic law in the scriptures, according to some biblical scholars, but it is disputed, particularly the Decalogue. So you have from Hammurabi to the Mughals, via a range of Nebuchadnezzar the first, the biblical, and then the Syrian, the Cyrus of Persia. Political involvement in what they believed continued almost to the end of Ottoman Empire in 1923. And when the Jesuits first came to Lahore, former British Raj, their first contact was Akbar, one of the Mughals, to establish their missions here. So there is a bedfellow between religious affiliations, religious options, and the emperor and the government. And there is not a single history. If you take Argentina today, it's only a Roman Catholic who can be the president of Argentina. In Sri Lanka, where Dr. Gunaratna comes from originally, it's only a singular Buddhist who can be the president. Perhaps in your case, it is a Muslim who can be the president or the prime minister of this country. So there is something woven into religion and politics. And my first question goes to His Excellency Waheed, who was a president himself in this beautiful island of Maldives. And I would like, he had nearly 2 years of presidency, but apart from that, he was involved in UNICEF, UNPD and UNESCO, both particularly in South Asia. So I'm sure you met and you had to confront, perhaps. So you as a former president, sir, can you explain to us in few minutes how you manage that dominant Muslim society and its ulama as part of South Asia and the global ulama? How you manage your conduct as a former president during your tenure in the Maldives? Over to you, sir.
Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Thank you for giving me this opportunity. I'm glad this is not going to be a session to bash politicians, because I'm the only politician here. It is an ex-politician. So I'm glad you're just asking me about my relationship with the ulama while I was president. Clearly, in any society, there are dominant religions, and the political leaders have to pay attention to what the religious community has to say. And in the case of Maldives, we are 100% Muslim country, and Islam and governance have always been intermingled. So our constitution is a combination of Islamic Sharia and civil law. So it has been like this, but Maldives traditionally has been a very moderate country, very homogeneous country. more recently, and I would say in the last 20, 30 years or so, we've had colleagues who study abroad and come back, religious studies, who have different ideas and who have brought in a more hardline and extremist ideas about what Islam is. And so this has been an issue of tension, and we have dealt with them peacefully. We've not had any confrontation. So they were part of my coalition government as well, because they have their own political parties, the Adalat Party, and their main ideological religious background is from the Wahhab tradition. But we kept them in our coalition, and the collective governance through cabinet process was able to moderate the outcome of our decisions. And so I'm glad to say that we did not have major complication with them. There have been instances of some misguided parties being involved in foreign wars and foreign conflicts. But the state has been trying to prevent and minimize this as much as possible.
Thank you, Your Excellency. I would like to take it up from there to Professor Rohan Gunaratna. He's one of those who has extensive investigative data collection right across the radicalized world of religiously motivated, inspired violence. And not just that, in his own country, he probably has interviewed those radicalized groups, not just in Sri Lanka, but also Al-Qaeda, plus the ISIS. And his definitive book on Inside Al-Qaeda, the Network of Global Terror, by Columbia in 2002, I believe, gives us a definitive architecture of religiously inspired violence. Religiously inspired violence. And Dr. Gunaratna, I want to ask you this specific question. In your investigative data collection, where you personally encountered those who have been involved in terror and re-radicalizing the next generation, whether element of religion has been an integral part to the formation of a terrorist.
We have seen three principal drivers of terrorism, but 80% of the violence worldwide is because of the misinterpretation of faith. So if you look at the three waves of terrorism the world has witnessed in the last 40 years, the first wave was left and right-wing terrorism. Second wave was ethno-political terrorism. And the third wave is the politico-religious terrorism. And I want to share with you, based on my interviews in Bagram in Afghanistan, based on my interviews in Camp Cropper in Iraq, based on my interviews even in Pakistan and in Sri Lanka, in the Philippines, in many other countries. Those who spoke to me, they very clearly told me that they are influenced by their faith to attack unbelievers. But I want to say that Islam does not say to attack unbelievers. Buddhism doesn't say that. Hinduism does not say that. Sikhism does not say that. Judaism doesn't say that. But all these extremists and terrorists have misused and abused religion to mount these attacks. That is why I think the 7th International Conference on World Religions, convened by the Minhaj University, is a very important contribution to correct the misinterpretation and the misrepresentation of faith. So I congratulate all of you for your participation in this, and I ask all of you to have your own social media to counter the misinterpretation so that the world can live in peace and harmony. If you don't do this, others will not do it. So I also want to thank Dr. Hussain Khadri. I also want to thank Dr. Hassan Khadri for their leadership in creating at Minhaj University the environment to, in many ways, that will influence Pakistan, because you have to protect your country. Your country is the most important and precious piece of land you have. Your citizens are your gems. So to make sure that they remain moderate, tolerate, they value coexistence, that we always rebut the misinterpretation and the misrepresentation of faith. Dr. Hussain yesterday gave a brilliant presentation where he touched the hearts of all the ladies who are being regularly beaten by their husbands by the misinterpretation. So I think that there is a lot that Minhaj can do to correct and to build the right understanding. Thank you very much.
Checking. Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Gunaratna, for that experience-based intervention and also motivating all the listeners and our admin here to keep on going on this path. And there's only one Pakistani on this panel. And I want to go to the right over there, Dr. Hassan. Dr. Hassan, you are not a stranger to the department here, to our university here. You have been during your younger days, you have been a journalist, and then subsequently you have been a trainer of trainers of journalists in this country. And your contribution in the sense of journalism had been unique. And you have also worked with several institutes connected to the State Department, but diplomatically connected to Islamabad. And you have had links since the time of Benazir Bhutto and Nawaz Sharif and General Musharraf in your dealings, sometimes briefing and debriefing with your training of trainers. And have you, in your dealings, ever found that these three, particularly these three, or before these three individuals, presidents, and the subsequent ones, in their utterances, in their writings, in their political jargon, ever promoted, even insidiously promoted, religiously inspired terror and violence? I'm asking you very sensitive questions, but that is the point.
I think I'm not okay, is it? So thank you for introducing me, Professor Shanthikumar. Let me begin it with this way. The three prime ministers or head of the states you have mentioned in Pakistan, that I directly work with in various capacities with them while being part of the international diplomacy and as a terrorism and counter-terrorism expert or political specialist. Yes, my answer is yes, that they have been involved very much in it and use the religious card whenever they could to achieve their political ends. And it does not end here. In my capacity in the past 35 years of professional career, as a journalist, as a diplomat, as a trainer, and as an academic, yes, I have come across with a lot of them in Pakistani politics. They have not using shamans to bring good luck to them and from playing the religion to win their election. Let me give you one example. When President Musharraf came into power in 1999, and when he was about in his fag end, in the last leg of his rule in 2007, when he saw that the things are going against him, then he came on television live program and said that when there was attack at the Baitullah Sharif, the Holy Mosque, way back in 79 probably. So he said, I was a special forces officer and my team was sent over there and I got the Holy Mosque rescued from the terrorists who have occupied it. Not only that, he said, in my capacities I went there and I was allowed to go on the top of on the roof of the Holy Kaaba and I was allowed to say azan, the prayer call over there. So when he see that his rule was vulnerable, he used the religion card telling people that since I am the chosen one who was allowed to say prayer call right on the roof of Holy Kaaba, so I am the right person, you should select me. So all of them have used it. And frankly speaking, when talking of Nawaz Sharif, in his three terms, all his three terms, I've seen him playing religion card and very in the first stint in early 90s, he tried to pose himself as Amirul Momineen. So it was not only General Zia, the military dictatorship, who wanted to be Amirul Momineen, Nawaz Sharif Saab has done it as well. And when it comes to playing that, I remember in 1988 when Benazir came back to Pakistan, I'm just concluding up, came back to Pakistan, the Prime Minister, she was not a Prime Minister then, in his election campaign, she came to a think tank in Karachi. I was sitting over there and she said, Islam is our religion and socialism is our economy. Having said that, all of them played, I've answered your question, but one thing more. Dealing with, in the past 34 years, various shades of five brands, what I've learned that all of them, my way or the highway, this is their motto. If I am still alive, maybe the cats have 9 lives. I survived almost half a dozen, murder attempts on me. My way or the highway?
Microphone. My way is highway, but the highways are expensive and vulnerable. Because if we don't drive properly on highways, we will crash, and that will be an kind of a grand finale crash. That's a good kind of a metaphor. Mr. Hassim, I'm thankful that you have some good ideas all the way from Islamabad. Thank you. I'll come back to you in my second session. Next to you and in the middle is Mr. Ransom. What do you make of all this in your view? And you think that my reference to Nabucodonosor as a lawmaker and taking the Israelites into Babylon, that is before the invasion of Cyrus, before the Persians took over Baghdad and Babylon became Cyrus' domain. I will refer to Cyrus's importance of constitution, Cyrus's constitution. But I want to get back to you about the Decalogue, the Mosaic Decalogue of Musa's Decalogue, as a kind of a conduct which came out for Christians in the Masoretic text of the Hebrew Bible, which is part of the Torah, and which of course influenced the Christian theological development into Christ's life, Jesus' life, because Jesus as a Jew refers to Decalogue in his formative years and as well as his theological development. I would like you to comment on whether the biblical scholars are in agreement on this matter, or whether there is a dispute that no, it was society formation during the time. This is after Moses walked into the promised land that you referred to yesterday. Sir, over to you. Yes.
Okay. Well, thank you for the question. Someone once said you should never ask a theologian for a question because they go down deeper, stay down longer, and come up murkier than anyone else.
I will stop you, sir.
But let me say this about the Decalogue. The theme that runs through those 10 commandments is one of respect. Respect for God, respect for His name, respect for others, respect for their property, respect for their life. And so when we eliminate that kind of thinking, we lose the fundamental ability to respect. And the reason why that becomes central to this conversation is we do talk a lot today about tolerance, but there is a key difference between the value of tolerance and respect. So for example, if I were to say to one of my panelists, I'm prepared to tolerate you, it's a very strange thing to say, actually. I'm saying I'm right, you're wrong. But maybe you're too stupid to realize you're wrong. But I'm gracious and merciful. I'm prepared to put up with you. That's not a compliment. If, however, I say I respect you, now I'm saying something very different. I'm now saying there's something about you that demands I treat you in a certain way. The very fact you're a human being commands that I have to treat you with respect. The key difference is this. It is very hard to tolerate someone and disagree with them, but it is very easy to respect someone and disagree. Because whenever you disagree, you're no longer, if you like, tolerating their view and saying, I don't mind, you're saying, I think something different. So if we are to truly love each other, how do we learn to treat each other with respect? And I wouldn't, from a Western perspective, if you look at most Western's politics now, what we've seen is a collapse of respect. People no longer know how to disagree well. People cannot disagree without becoming disagreeable. And so this inability between competing parties, religious factions, to dialogue with respect, valuing the people, upholding them, even maybe running to their defense, even when they disagree with you, we've lost these values. And they are fundamental to any form of civilization. So the way I would summarize that would by saying this: the true test of a civilization is not how do we treat those who agree with us, it's rather how do we treat those who disagree with us. And therefore, that theme of respect that runs through the Decalogue, and we see in other moral systems around the world, must be recovered if we find a way to live meaningfully together with our differences, but in peaceful coexistence with each other.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Ramsey. It's a very interesting analysis and a description between respect and tolerance. Basically, tolerance is I tolerate you, but fundamentally I don't like you. That's how it is. It is in a kind of linguistically, sort of etymologically understood. I don't like you, therefore I tolerate you. I don't like Mazam, but I tolerate him because I have nothing else to do. Because I want to forgive him. I want to say that you are a good guy, but not the good guy all the time in everything. Therefore, I tolerate you. Basically, I don't want to see you often. So tolerance, I think, has that connotation, etymological connotation, when it is used in English. So we have to be careful. Right. Mr. Sanbi, he's in Sheikhpur from the Seventh-day Adventist Church, and we have several churches represented here, Catholic churches yesterday, and the Church of Norway and Church of Scotland, one of the free churches of Scotland. And we have Seventh-day Adventist, which is a global church, which is found in all over the world with specific agenda in their lives, and their commitment is enormous. We have in our own countries. And sir, tell us a little bit about yourself. And in the middle of 98% Muslims, what might be your ministry in this giantly populated South Asian nation state of Pakistan?
Okay, yes. I come from the South Korea. Also, I have been serving this Pakistan almost 8 years. So I worked in Indonesia around 5 years. Right. Even though I'm a Korean, also I'm a Christian. I don't know why I'm here serving this Pakistan. But there's a reason God has purpose to send me here, according to biblical basis and principle. Right? If you see the Bible, we have the totally have the full of the idea, which have the foundation of the topic, restoration. Each religion, each political leader be concerned about how to restore relationship, and also every kind of welfare, everything, right? So as I understand this kind of issue, first I must understand about what its main issue and problem come from. I think since the Genesis chapter 3 mentioned the fallen sin. Fallen sin meaning not just talking about doing behavior in falsely. This talking about judgment, about my consent. Since people ate, human Adam and Hawa ate the fruit of the knowledge and good and evil, from that time they start judge others. Knowledge, good and evil meaning you are right, I'm wrong, or I'm wrong, I'm right, or you're right. From that time start this tolerance and judgment and partition, right? That's why. So I have the concern about how to restore this kind of problem is there. As I concern about this Christianity, there's two basic things. Number one, unselfishness, service for others. The basic foundation. The second is the unconditional forgiveness. Basically, two things, right? We are pursued how we can try to enlarge the greatest love and also expanding the service for others. So basically, this concept, I'm serving this Pakistan, but still I'm learning about culture, and also not just culture and also like religion, everything. But basically, this concept, unselfish, the love service, and also unconditional love. This is what I just have to motivate to serve this Pakistan.
I'll come back to you on certain other points in our next round. Your Excellency, you have a lot of migrant workers in your country who are not necessarily Muslim by religious affiliation, and particularly the ones who are coming from the Philippines and from Sri Lanka. To your profusely growing the tourist industry. Of course, your rival is in Sri Lanka in terms of business, because both are islands, but Sri Lanka has many pluses because you have the sea, but Sri Lanka has other things to share with the tourist. And in this, when the migrant workers come and work, among the majority population, alongside the Pakistani Muslims, alongside the Bangladeshi Muslims who are also migrant workers. But have you seen that your government at any point giving preference by choice, by employment opportunities, by choice, that they prefer to have a Muslim in their establishment rather than a man or a woman of faith from another tradition? Sir.
Thank you for the question. In the Maldives, we don't have that kind of prejudice with regards to other religions and nationalities. We don't screen people for their religion when we employ them. So in fact, when we first started bringing in expat workers to Maldives was in the 60s as teachers from Sri Lanka. Now, only a few of them were Muslim. Most of them were either Hindu or Buddhist. But we didn't know whether they were Buddhist or Christian or Hindu. It was not our concern. We just wanted good teachers. So I never had a Muslim teacher from Sri Lanka, although most of my teachers were Sri Lankans. We began to see them worship. That was new to us, but they were allowed to worship in their homes and within their community hall. I hope it stays that way because we have about 200,000 expatriate workers in a population of only about 400,000 people, citizens. So I hope it stays that way.
No, I just wanted to check it out with you because you have been also former president, whether there had been some hiccups in the recruitment processes. Because it can happen. It can happen. That liability, that space is always there for the vulnerable groups. Now this was in 1984 in Islamabad. It's a meeting of martial law administration coming together, and that is heading for a referendum for none other than Ziaul Haq, his second term. He was very unpopular. We as South Asians were aware of that. Although he has visited Sri Lanka, although there is a hospital in his name in Sri Lanka, but strange thing happened. He persuaded the martial law administration for a specific statement before the referendum for people to say either yes or no. And I'm trying to read to you. And this process was tedious and apparently deeply undemocratic. Deeply undemocratic. It came under heavy criticism by the global community. And he says, the question he's asking is the voters whether they wanted to support administration and therefore want General Musharraf and another 5 years after martial law was lifted. Of course, he became a president from his army clothes to a civilian clothes. But this is much more worse than that. Do you endorse, he's asking, do you endorse the process initiated by the President of Pakistan, General Ziaul Haq, for bringing the law of Pakistan to conformity with the injunctions of Islam as laid down in the Holy Quran and Sunnah of the Holy Prophet and for the purpose and the preservation of the ideology of Pakistan, favor of continuation and further consolidation of that process for the smooth transfer of power to the elected representatives of the people. And the question is a yes or a no. And you can imagine what happened. He was referendum, he was re-elected. And within 2 years, that fatal accident happened here in the midair. The plane blasted. I'm not relating one to the other, but I'm relating how the text once again, and the spirit of Islam and the holy name of the Prophet of Islam is brought in to come to power. So it goes very well with our theme, whether exploitation of religion by political powers exist. Nizam,
Yes.
Doctor,
Yes.
I want to ask you this question because there will be many here to answer me. I know they are going to ask me several questions later on, but I want you as a panel member from
Yes.
here in Pakistan.
Okay. Two things. Number one, a one-liner to what I said in my first take. When we say that the use of religion as a card to achieve political ends is one thing, and use of religion as a political card to promote terrorism is something else. So when I say that politicians have been using this card to achieve their political ends, they were, but it does not imply that they were using it for promoting terrorism, right? Whereas on the east and the west sides of Pakistan in the neighborhood, we see that certain governments have used this card for the use of political ends as well as for terrorism. So Pakistan, I clarify for this thing. Now, yes, it has been in use for political ends, and they can go to any extent for this because it works. But in the political history of Pakistan, 77 years, let me tell you, we had 3 phases of martial law, major, and 3 phases of democracy, whatever the kind of a democracy it was. Now in the martial law first phase, the emphasis was, and the democracy phase, emphasis was on to get allied with the Western camp for X number of reasons, where I say that for the USA, and I say that the US aid had been a social aids for Pakistan. AID, social aids, AIDS, aids for Pakistan, that's how it turned out. Now what happened in the second phase of martial law in 80s and even before that, Zulfikar Ali Bhutto, the founder of Pakistan People's Party, the first democratic regime, his twisted version of Islam appeared while he was following a socialism path in his the later part of his political career. What he did to please clergy in Pakistan and right-wing extremists or far-right people, he introduced certain laws which become part of the constitution. And that constitution amendments regarding a certain minority and certain other things which he has brought in, those laws turned out to galvanize into a major issue for this country dealing right now. Okay. Now coming to General Zia, his agenda of martial law was entirely different because there was a jihad going on in Afghanistan and he wanted to promote religious extremism, not terrorism. He promoted that so he can stay in power and whatever his policy was to bring some money to the country, right? In the third phase of martial law, we see that of General Musharraf, It was a declutter period what General Zia has done to bring in religious right-wing extremism to the country. That was Musharraf's period, was to declutter it. Because then we were in war against terrorism and we did not require or still not require the religious terrorism. Rather, we need to subdue it and comes to the moderation. That's why he talked about religious moderation.
Thank you, Dr. Hassan. I will come back to you about a penal code that he sort of introduced into the 1976 constitutional reforms. I will come back to you a little bit later. Now, Dr. Rohan, you are adopted Singapore as your sort of because of your adopted country as your because of your work. Definitely you work there, but Singapore has a different model. I think that model has worked well for not just economics, but in investing in the social capital, as we call in our jargon in sociology. That Lee Kuan Yew's model of, it was not just a model of democracy, but creating a country that is cohesive, sufficiently cohesive, where the Chinese, the Malays, the Tamils, and the natives could live side by side. Could you enlighten our audience on this matter? Because he was called the benevolent dictator. A benevolent dictator. He's a dictator, but a benevolent. Could you explain to us a little bit about it? Thank you.
Singapore model is irrespective of religion. You can live in Singapore and work in Singapore and even be the Prime Minister or the President of Singapore. So Singaporeans, they all take a pledge. That is, they recognize the differences, but they say for the sake of Singapore, we will all work together to build Singapore. Singapore also has very firm laws when it comes to maintaining what you call religious peace. That is, the religious space is tightly protected, it is tightly regulated. They do not allow anyone from Saudi Arabia to come and preach Wahhabism, because Saudi faith is largely for 100% Muslim community. So they do not accept Saudi funding. Although now MBS is changing all that. He is very strict with anyone who preach against anyone else's faith. So in Singapore, religion and governance is separate. People cannot use religion in the secular space. So I personally believe that Singapore model is a very good model, even for Pakistan. If your political parties do not misuse and abuse religion, your country will be a very peaceful country. In the case of Sri Lanka, which is primarily a Sinhalese Buddhist population, if we tell the monks, don't use religion to have some prejudice or suspicion or resentment against other communities, Sri Lanka will be a peaceful country. So I think that it is very important for every country to control their religious clergy very firmly and very tightly, so that religion does not spill over to the domain of governance. Because if politicians use and misuse religion, you will never have peace. I want to also share with you, traditionally the land of Pakistan was very peaceful because you had Sufism, local and traditional Islam. there were no such conflicts. These ideas came from outside. So you have to control the religious preachers by certifying them, by accrediting them, by having proper training programs where they learn about other faiths. So they have to live harmoniously with other religions. But this is a very difficult challenge. You will say that I am dreaming, but it has been done in Singapore and in many other countries. We have to tightly regulate the religious space, because the religious space is a treasure, a precious treasure that we all must protect from infiltration. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you for that experience-based recommendations and advice to this audience. And it's a very important and significant character trait of society formation, community building, and social cohesion. Mr. Ramsden, I want to get back to you, to the biblical walkover, I call it. Musa never could, he only saw on the mountain the promised land in the far away. But it was Joshua who walked into the land of the Amorites, the Jebusites, and the Hittites. There is a very clear of walkover and taking over because of the promise of Yahweh, the promise of the Adonai. And it is a serious infiltration of the divine command in the temporal action. The problem is that divine command involving the temporal action. We become the custodians and the soldiers on behalf of God. God does not need our protection. And this is a serious issue in the text. The text is that Joshua walks with the Canaanites, the Israelites, and that takes over. The result is violence. So there is a very clear kind of takeover. And I want to say, I'm more interested in your response to the temporality of the ulama, the temporality of the religious teachers, the theologians, and how they handle the work of God, the Missio Dei, the work of God. Sir, can you tell us a little bit about this?
It's a very broad question because you're now covering thousands of years. Let me frame my response this way. When Jesus Christ came, he was a very unpopular figure. He was not popular with the people or with the leaders. The trouble is, he challenged both. Now, the people were upset with him because they thought when such a figure came, he would bring their political liberation and overthrow their oppressors. And yet, manifestly, he did not do this. And those who came in his footsteps, like the Apostle Paul said, you must honor the king and follow the laws of the land and do not rise up against your masters, which was very controversial. So this is why I think it's very important, certainly from a Christian perspective, when looking on this, to say, why did he do this? Why did he not advocate revolution, overthrow, whatever? And I think you see that how he reinterprets the law that you referenced earlier. So as you know, Jews 637 ceremonial laws, that comes down to 427. In the 10 Commandments, you have 10. There was one group of thought that reduced it to 5. Then they asked Jesus, what is the greatest command? You would expect him to give 1. Instead he gives 2. You will love the Lord your God with all your heart, all your soul, and all your mind, and you will love your neighbor as yourself, which we've already heard referred to yesterday. And so, therefore, the understanding is, what does it then mean, therefore, to love? So there are many things which are recorded in the Old Testament which are not necessarily recorded with approval. And there are some very difficult ones to which you just also referred. The best understanding I can come to is, what does it mean, therefore, if I am going to love God and love other people? And there's a very interesting biblical definition, which is very famous. Many of you in this room, you're well educated, you know it. Love is kind, love is patient, and so on. The word love is kind literally means to make yourself useful to those you are with. And there are two words for patience which are used, how we understand love. One is makrothumos. It means patience that puts your anger a long way away from yourself. So there's a story told of a king who was so angry with his people, he sent the army 2 days' march from the city. So if the king was tempted to use the army to hurt his own people, it would take 2 days for the messenger to reach the army, 3 days for the army to march back. He has 5 days to calm down. So there is this discipline of how do I put any anger I may feel a long way away from me. But there's a second word for patience, which is not the patience of the strong, like the king, but the patience of the weak. What do you do when you cannot change the circumstances you're in? And we sometimes call this endurance. What does it mean to endure suffering when you can't actually change the laws or the society, but somehow you have to be faithful in it? And so I think this is why Jesus' teaching when he came seemed so revolutionary to many of the own religious scholars who were there, thinking, how can you advocate and teach this when we've interpreted previous things very differently? And his response to them was to remind them of how patient God has been with them. How even though they have consistently failed and done many things wrong, he is still patient with them. And so this is how I understand what this actually means and how it should be interpreted and applied today. Which is why, again, you see Jesus say, you heard an eye for an eye, a tooth for a tooth, but I tell you. Okay? That's not what this looks like going forward. I'm telling you, love your enemies. Bless those who persecute you. Do not repay evil for evil. Do not repay insult with insult. So these are the things which have to be embodied to build. And I've been to Singapore many times, one of my favorite countries to visit. Amazing food, very beautiful scenery, but wonderful people. How do you, with disparate groups, create unity and cohesion? It has to be born out of that mutual love of making ourselves useful to each other and of finding out how to serve each other, and also find a way in which we can actually build positively and not respond either out of strength and anger or weakness and anger. Both can be destructive.
Yes, sir. Okay, sir. Thank you. Thank you for that. I like, even though the question was rather complex and difficult text, but you referred to the Second Testament to sort of, as if in theological terms, second Moses, sort of exactly theologically understanding. So, but I like the definition, dual definition of patience. Mr. Sandi, you are a minority of a minority, being a Seventh-day Adventist. And how do you feel, not just as a minority in Pakistan for the last 8 years, you are racially also a Korean, but hardly, maybe you might be few, maybe in Sheikhpura you might be the only one. How do you feel to be living a minority even within the Christian community, with this Church of Pakistan and the Roman Catholic Church, sort of the two big streams within the small population of Christians in this country? Sir.
Yes. In Korea, we have the freedom of the religious liberty. Whenever I came here, I saw all of the culture and decision and relationship, even tradition, everything related with religion. It made me really surprised. So I really felt awesome. Right. Also, I really admire about that kind of religious lifestyle. One thing I'm most confused is that this religion connect with politics. So Korea also have strong the principle of the separation between religion and state. But here, whatever they decide and also move everything that's based on this kind of religion. right? So I just spent time to adjust, and from the beginning I couldn't understand all kind of decision making or such kind of some conflict between each other religion. But as I stay here, I just a little bit understand and adjust. But one thing I found here, right? Whenever I just serving this Pakistan, right? Even something little bit confused to adjust this all kind of the combination of the religion and politics, everything. But one thing I found it, right? This the kind of the separation of the religious and state were combined all together. If out of the goal of the restoration or recover the image of divine, the character of the human being, it can be corrupted. It can be corrupted. That's why, as I just observed, this ADS service, right? Somehow the religious leader and also political leader, they try to recover the image of the divine nature, but somehow because of the intervened by such kind of selfishness, they own the aim of the political issue, it can be reached. It cannot be reached, the main goal of this. Right? So along with that, I'm just trying to concern how I try to educate our students, because I'm serving this Pakistan Adventist Seminary and College. The challenge cannot be changed, but as I just try to training our young generation and educating our children, I adjust culture and also I just guide them in right direction to understand about this kind of separation of the religion and also politics. But still, yeah, there's many challenges here to adjust as a foreigner.
Thank you. I think we have come to the end of the session. I would have liked to go for the third round with some questions, but I want a take-home naan by each of them to the people, by way of your wisdom and your experience. I call it a naan. Take a naan home. Because naan is very precious because of your fertile soil here. So for me it is very metaphorical, even though I have some hesitation to eat naan, but I prefer to eat roti. But some of here, my colleagues probably might like to eat the different varieties of naans here. That's why it is metaphorical. This is different varieties of naan, but the roti is the same, north, south, east and west. But the naans are different. Therefore, I would like them to give you a different naan. Please take it home and take it to your lunch table, and you can put it in your bag probably and take it home. Now, one sentence. What would you like to offer as this tasteful naan from Islamabad? Mazam, doctor.
Yeah. For the past 2 decades, we are actually working on that. Number one, President Musharraf's period and then the successive democratic governments. So what actually happened in late 70s and during 80s, we are trying to declutter it, we are trying to reconstruct it, and remember that to reconstruct a broken vase, it's a tough task we are going through. However, we are not as lucky as Sri Lanka and Maldives were when right-wing extremism in Sri Lanka touched base, Al-Qaeda in right after 9/11, and Maldives in 2011 and 2012. They were lucky enough to get rid of it, but Pakistani situation is that on the eastern side with India and the western side with Afghanistan, so there is right-wing extremism, rather turning terrorism here. So it is directly having impact on Pakistan to respond to that in various ways. So we are, on the optimistic note, we are very much working towards that goal. This is our naan.
Yeah. It's a broken vase, but can be built, because we can find glue among us. That brokenness need not last. It can be repaired. And we are the people who can repair it. Thank you. Sir, Mr. Master. Ramsden,
Yes.
sir, your take home.
My take home will be how grateful I am to Minhaj University, not just for hosting this, but for showing such clear leadership to want to build peace, harmony and prosperity in Pakistan. And that is a blessing to me. And I pray that the leadership of the university and its voice may be strengthened. I will leave you one takeaway for you. Twice I was asked about Moses. The Bible says Moses was the most humble man who ever lived. Many see him as one of the greatest leaders who ever lived. And the quality that marked him out was humility, that he was more humble. And let me suggest one reason why, just one. Moses should have been killed, but he was rescued at the instigation of his sister by Pharaoh's daughter. Pharaoh's daughter gave Moses his name. We do not know hers. Yet without her and her demonstration of leadership to bring a baby into the palace of the king who ordered his execution shows how brave she is and that there are moral limits to power. So here's my encouragement, if you like, for you. We do not know her name, Pharaoh's daughter, but she changed the world. So what is more important for us? To try to make a name for ourselves or to try to change the world? What is more important? And I'm hoping that there are more people here who are committed to changing this world for a better place than trying to make a name for themselves, that somehow we may see some greater things to come in the future.
Moral power is a deep-seated resistance to political power. It is proven beyond reasonable doubt. Your Excellency, take home.
My take home from this conference is basically the understanding that all religions are fundamentally forces for peace, for harmony and for development. And that religion is not the main cause of war and conflict, but there are so many other factors. And I also want to say that politicians will always rely on religious leaders and religion. And similarly, religious leaders will also rely on politicians. That does not mean that all politics is bad. It doesn't mean that all politicians are bad. I think the study of political science is not about learning how to manipulate, how to exercise corruption and oppression. I think learning political science is to learn how to work with others so that you bring about peaceful development for our countries.
Okay, the enemy of religion is not politics, and the enemy of politics is not religion. Then who is the enemy? It's a good question for us to take home and ponder over. Who is the culprit? Temporality and the divine injunctions. How do we manage this? Thank you, sir, driving us towards that sublime thought. Professor Rohan, your take home for us. Yes, it's on. Put it on.
How many universities in Pakistan will have a conference with the Sikh, the Hindu, the Christian, the Buddhist, and the Muslim ulama? So I pay a tribute to Minhaj University for its pioneering leadership. It reflects the very spirit of the cultural capital of Pakistan, which is Lahore. When I visited the Badshahid Mosque this time, I could see the Sikh Gurdwara. I could see the Christian and the Hindu shrines. I also visited the Lahore Museum, which has one of the richest collections of Gandhara art and architecture, which is Buddhism and Hinduism. So I think that the spirit of Lahore is at the Minhaj University, and I hope that all universities in Pakistan will host similar meetings to build a specialist understanding and public awareness so that we can regulate the religious space very tightly and we protect it as a precious treasure where everyone can live harmoniously. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Professor Gunaratna. So preserve it, protect it, because it is a precious stone that we have. It has a space, but if it crosses that space, then there is the repercussion to it. And we know in history, when religion crosses its boundaries, the assault for that religion, that tradition has been enormous. And enough and more historical evidence. You can refer to AI, and AI will give you a band of references to that assault by political and other forces on religious tradition. Thank you, Professor Rohan. And Mrs. Sungbae, your thought for us.
Yes. While I attended some seminar, I was so impressed about two words. One is forgiveness and reconciliation. Right? Even though we dispute and arguing a lot about how we can find peace without these two basic pillars, forgiveness and reconciliation, nothing happen. Right? And whenever I saw some news in the media and also newspaper, last time the Jaranwala cases, do you know about the cases? Some of Christians, the family and houses burned and church also destroyed by riot. But at that time they tried to expose what kind of persecution they got it. But I really get upset at Christianity. Why you expose this kind of some suffering to others? Instead of expose what we lost, why don't you kneel down to pray more? How we can forgive, how we try to console for them. This is the best way how we can try to overcome this kind of politics and religious conflict, everything. Right. Not only this case. So all around this Pakistan, I know that most of the Pakistani, they're hospitalized. If that hospitalized concern and nature connect with this forgiveness and reconciliation, how to unite each other, I believe this Pakistan can be the holy ground like Jerusalem to train this Pakistan. Thank you.
Thank you. My apologies because I cannot offer you the question time because we have a very tight schedule ahead of us. The lunch is waiting for us and we are also waiting for lunch. And